So, this is a series called The Edges of Facilitation, and it's born from the types of questions that I get asked quite a lot when I tell people that I'm a facilitator, because quite often people do not know what that means. And they ask me, is it like this other thing? And I've actually come to love that question. Is it like this other thing? And they ask me everything from, is it like consulting? Is it like mediation? Is it like training? And I think comparing facilitation to other things is actually a really healthy practice because it allows us to understand what it is that we actually offer, what it is that is really serving our clients, and where maybe something would serve them better. And it lets us know where it lets us reflect on where we want to stretch into something else and where we want to set a firm boundary and maybe bring somebody in to do something else. Our topic for today is facilitation versus training, and I am joined by a wonderful facilitator who I've learned a lot about learning design from, Florentine Versteeg, and we are going to be comparing the topic from our own perspective. Welcome, Florentine.
Yes, welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Lucy.
Excellent. So, just before we dive in, maybe you can just give people a quick intro of your connection to both the topic of training and facilitation so that they know where we're coming from.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really excited to talk about this because it's very close to my heart. So that also leads into the introduction. So I'm coming very much from the training field, the learning design field. That's really where I started my interest in working with people and especially leaders and leadership development. And now I try to focus in my facilitation very much on what we would call the pure art of facilitation. We'll go more into that, of course, when I'm leading groups through decision-making processes. So that journey of training versus facilitation has really been my personal journey as well. So excited to talk about it today with you.
Yeah, so excited. And the other thing, one of the other reasons that I was very keen that it was you who came to talk about this topic, is that obviously, even if we're just talking in English, the topic of what is training and what is facilitation is kind of a grey area. But obviously, lots of us work in an international context, and
Yeah.
there's lots of other languages playing into how we interpret the different words. And I know that you are both a I can't remember how many languages you speak, but lots of them. And also pulling out the kind of the nuances of the different languages and the benefits of using different languages in facilitation is something that you're very good at doing. So I thought it would be a wasted moment if we didn't if we didn't start this conversation by making it an even broader topic. So Portuguese, Dutch,
That's
English.
it. And English, that's it. It's
I
not
think
that
that's
dramatic.
I think that's enough.
That's
Um,
enough.
that's enough. But I'm just wondering which of these words even exist in the other languages that you speak, and do they have any kind of associations? How do they map onto your English, the English conversation that we're going to have today?
Exactly. I think that's really good. Um, so the question about language is fascinating because there's always that layer of culture on top as well. So even if we can translate the words literally into these other languages, and Portuguese being a Latin language, I think it might apply for similar Latin languages as well. Even if we can say training means this in Dutch or this in Portuguese, we might still not get that sort of same cultural context. So that's also, I just wanted to say that as like a remark ahead of that. And I noticed, especially when we started working, so I've worked for about 14 years in Brazil. Most of my professional career is in Brazil. And there, the word training has a very different meaning from what we would use in English and also in Dutch, because Dutch is a language that borrows a lot of words from English. It's quite close to, especially the British culture. So that difference is not that big. But I think with Portuguese, especially the word training actually was only related to sports for a long time. You would be the sports trainer. And so when we come into an organization and we say we're offering a training, it became a bit challenging sometimes. Now it has changed a lot. So now you can actually use the word like treinamento, you would say, right? Like a training. And then there's that different levels of what that then means between sort of a traditional, yeah, what would you call it? Like a classroom setting. And then we're already getting into the discussion of the difference between the education and training and facilitation. But yeah, so that's definitely tricky as well. The beautiful thing about the Latin languages, I just wanted to point out with the facilitation, is that the word facile, right, which is literally easy, where also facilitation comes from, right? Like the Latin word to make things easy. That was actually when it became more common to use facilitation in Portuguese and in Brazil. It was actually very easy to explain that it's literally making things easy, not simple, but easy. So that's nice to play with that. We don't have that in English or Dutch, right? That direct connection. Yeah.
Exactly. Only the Latin speakers, which are a dying out breed.
Yes, exactly.
Certainly
Yeah.
in the UK. Excellent. So maybe it's also useful to set the frame of the conversation as
Yeah.
well, because there are many things that we could talk about, particularly facilitation. It's just a huge topic. And I originally came at this topic from the perspective of this is about learning, right? This is all like these are the types of conversations that we're going to have when we're talking about learning. And then when we were preparing for this conversation, you pointed out actually it's a bit broader than just learning. It's about things like mindset change occasionally and behavioral change, like all of the types of things that we might use training in inverted commas for. So I just wonder, like, from your perspective, what's the best way to set the frame around the conversation? What are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about when we're comparing training to facilitation?
I think it's a really, I think that in itself will answer also that question of the difference between facilitation and training, because I think learning is a really big spectrum. I think facilitation is actually almost smaller than that whole spectrum of everything that has to do with capacity building, teaching, training, educational settings. One of the main things we do as humans is learn, right? So from the day we're born until hopefully the day we die, we keep learning. So there's a lot of things that we talk about when we talk about how people teach, how people learn. So I think if we want to frame that, for me, it's very important that we focus on the area of sort of adult learning, right? So we apply, because that's where we get confused with, right? Like we come in to either train adults or we are facilitating them. So right, I think it's very important to frame that around adult learning. And one of the beautiful things that we've seen recently is that shift from a very classic front of the room teaching, or what I call instructing, to that realm of the training. So I think that is where we can focus on, and I think that's also where that confusion lies with facilitation. So we've been moving away from that very classic. We still teach kids that way, but that's another conversation. But that adult learning realm, where we've seen that it needs to be experiential, it needs to be active learning settings. And then we talk about capacity building in all settings, right? So we have the attitudes, the skills, the knowledge, the awareness that we're broadening for adults. I think that's where the scope of that is. And that's also where the confusion with facilitation comes. I don't think anybody will confuse a traditional third grade teacher with a facilitator. So I think, well, unless they're awesome teachers, but I think that's not really the conversation for today.
Yeah, maybe we'll come
That's
back and
another conversation.
do part two
Exactly.
on that one. As you can probably tell, there are many things I'm excited to talk to Flora about, and because Flora is one of the people that I learned the most about learning design from as part of a community that we were both part of, and she did this wonderful introduction to learning design course for us, and it featured a visual which was kind of the aha moment for me, where it really kind of put a few things into place in my mind. And I asked her if we could show it today, and she said yes. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'll bring that up, and we can just start talking through it. So yeah, should I bring the bubbles up?
Yeah, bring up the bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a visual we've been actually using in so many different ways for the last 10 years, because a lot of people come with this question. So the question you're bringing today really answered here through this visual, and a lot of people have used it, translated it. So I think it's definitely one that speaks to people. So what I also was just sharing before, so you have that very sort of traditional instructing, and when I call instructing, it's really that sort of one way passing on of content or information to a group or another person. So you have one center of knowledge, and that person is instructing that other person or the group. So that's more tradition, what I would call like the more traditional way of teaching. So you give instructions, you offer the solutions. It's about lectures, it's about presentations. Even a TED talk, as inspiring as it could be, it's just that sort of instructing and that one way. And again, it's really that traditional image we have of our teachers as well.
Yeah.
And then we're slowly moving, because also we've seen that sort of lack of effectiveness. It's very efficient, right? Instructing, but there's not always, the effectiveness is not always as high. And I think that's a really important difference between that efficiency and that effectiveness. And people are starting to move more towards training. And this started already in the 70s, right? When people started researching about adult learning. And then that sort of concept of training came into life, right? So beyond just giving instructions, how do you actually train people? So you still share a lot of your own knowledge. You can still be the expert, or you still have a certain content expertise, but you're also creating a lot of awareness. You're building capacity. You're sharing not only the actual information, but also the love of that information or the love of that content, so that people get an attitude shift, a mindset shift. And with that, they feel inclined to start building capacity and upgrading their skills. And that moves towards that realm of that facilitation where we completely depend on all the knowledge that's in the room. So the center of knowledge is really dispersed, where everybody is a knowledge center. And that's where innovation happens. So then your role as a facilitator shifts from being the center of knowledge to being the guider of the processes where you ask that question. So that's for dialogues, that's for where we want to solve conflicts, that's where we make decisions, set up strategic planning, because you need that knowledge in the room. And it's moving, as you can see as well, from this really sort of hierarchical, linear to a more flexible, collaborative way of working together. And the training fits perfectly there in the middle. And that's also why I think there's so much confusion about it.
So I think this is, I love this visual. It clicks a lot of things into my head. And I think one of the things that I have been on a bit of a journey to realize is that one of the keys in my mind to understanding what facilitation is about a particular attitude to expertise.
Yes.
About how you think of yourself and your role and who has the expertise in the room. And my kind of takeaway from this visual that I really, really like is that on the left-hand side, in the instructing world, there is somebody who is seen as an expert, and they are kind of one-to-many bestowing their knowledge on the rest of the room. Whereas with facilitating over on the right, it's much more of an acknowledgement that, yeah, maybe you have some expertise, but other people have expertise as well. And our job is to get that out of them and to make sure that people can share it between them.
I think one of the things that I always highlight when I talk to people about this, though, is that I don't want at any point to demonize the instructing, because I think it's something that as facilitators, we've seen the power of what facilitation does and the collaborative processes do. But at the same time, for me, it's almost an expansion of what we do as instructors and trainers, more than that is like it's a shift towards pure only facilitating. I think there are definitely still moments in capacity building, in education, where instructing is necessary. So and done well, like an inspiring lecture, a great teacher who shares his knowledge is still something that education definitely benefits from. So a lot of people, oh, now I only have to do activities in my classroom, or now it's only about getting people to talk to each other in small groups all the time. There are still definitely moments where an instructing moment can be really beautiful and inspiring as part of a capacity building process. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that's always important to, it's not the shift from one end to the other, it's the expansion of the range.
Inspirational sprinkles and
Yes, exactly.
yeah. Otherwise we're cheating people of opportunities
Yes,
to
exactly.
see things
Yeah.
a different way as well. Yeah. How, like, what would, in your mind, what would people experience differently if a facilitator, or if facilitator is the wrong word, what would people experience differently from somebody who was in training mode versus in facilitation mode?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sorry. When you're in a setting, and I hope in both cases, both trainers and facilitators do this well, they will definitely share the objectives of why people are in the room, right? So for me, what's really evident from the get-go will be that sorry, let's not confuse the terms learning facilitators, right? But trainers will share learning objectives. We are here to learn about psychological safety. We're here to learn, and if you're going for more hard skills, right, the specific technical things that people need to come out of a training with. And people will sort of sit, and I do think there's a little bit of a difference. There's a reaction we have when we know we're going to learn something. It's sort of like, okay, nice, I'm going to learn something new. We love that feeling. It really feeds us. Facilitation is also, in the beginning, we'll share saying, our goal is today to come out of this meeting with a strategic plan or with an innovative view on a new product. And that will trigger a sort of a different kind of movement of the people, right? They'll be like, all right, okay, thinking hat on, creative brain on. And so there's definitely that difference of how people will come into a room. And again, that's in all cases if the trainer or facilitator shares that objective. So that initial setup, I think, will already set the tone. And again, it doesn't mean that there will not be any learning in a facilitated process or in a facilitation, but it won't be the main objective. So I think that's, as a setup, will be a very different process. I also think there's another thing, but that's not a rule, but in my
No
view at
rules. We
least,
don't own these words.
there's a little bit of difference of timing as well, because facilitation in some cases needs much more space and time. So I find when I'm facilitating processes, it takes like this like we have 4 hours, we have 5 hours, 6 hours. Whereas I find like trainings, as a sort of a rule of thumb, are shorter and more like you don't have that space to focus for like 5 hours on it, especially online, right? I think that is a huge difference. But yeah, so that for me is definitely in the setup already, you share that big difference, definitely.
Yeah. And I wonder, just while you were talking, I was actually wondering if, in some senses, with training, you can articulate a learning objective. You can basically say, like, we are
Yeah.
trying to learn this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And with facilitation, you might learn some things. You're not always going to know what they are in advance. They
Yeah.
could be anything from, oh, it turns out I can work with that person if we behave in this particular way.
Exactly.
Or, oh, if we approach this thing from this angle, we get stuff done really fast. So it's applied learning,
Yeah.
trying stuff out from which you might learn things, but you don't always know what it is you're going to learn. It might just be a revelation somewhere along the process.
Yeah. And possibly that would make the learning objectives more individual as well,
Yeah.
right? Whereas in a training, you would move towards more sort of collective objectives. Of course, everybody learns in different ways, but like there's sort of a collective goal of we all come out of this with more awareness about da, da, da. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Mm-hmm.
And going back to the beginning, so the thing that you were saying about how training sometimes has a kind of physical, like, we associate physical things with the word training. Like, I train in the gym, for
Yes, exactly.
example.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually the sports. Yeah.
I also wonder if there's something about training which is a bit more about kind of building that muscle. Like, you know what it is, and you know that people need to practice it. So you're organizing an environment in which they can practice a particular thing in order to build muscles that aren't always physical muscles. They're kind of habits and
Yeah. Yeah.
behaviors.
Definitely. I like that. Yeah, I like that. I think it's really like that, right? Because skill building and capacity building is that muscle,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Yeah. I like that. Hmm.
Excellent. So I think we've covered a lot of the framing. Maybe the final thing that we should try and unpack is a bit about the skill set and the tool set.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe the way to approach that is thinking a bit about how you even get into these worlds. If you want to become a trainer, like, is there a what paths have you seen people enter the world of training from versus
Yeah.
facilitation? Are there particular things that you need to know or study that you think lend themselves well to one or the other?
That's a really good question. I think that, yeah, how do we become, there's so many different stories of how people become trainers or facilitators, right? I think my own story is sort of, it just happened. I was just always the one talking. So people just put me in front. You solve it then. So I come really from a training background. So I was first a trainer and then I became a facilitator, and that transition was almost painful. So I think it's I'll use my own journey to sort of do that skill set. I think the training, really, the skill set is there. You need to have the capacity to be able to take people on a learning journey. So you need to know something about a specific topic, what the emotions, the skills, the process to build that muscle, right? I'm going to use your metaphor here to actually do that. So is that by these visuals that I just shared, right? That's really a training moment, right? That's how it works in my brain. So I'm sharing it with you, and hopefully then we can ask some questions to the room. Does it resonate? So as a trainer, you need to have a certain content knowledge. You need to have a clarity of how people can then absorb that content. And there's also something about which I've really enjoyed as a trainer as well, using different forms of learning, right? So there's that sort of one direction talking, that instructing, but very quickly moving away from that towards reflection moments, towards sharing in groups, towards, and there's that facilitation comes in, but that skill of understanding different learning styles and knowing that some people need practical application, some people need to talk it through, some people need to read about it, some people need to sit with it. And so that understanding, I think, is a key skill of any trainer as well. So the content knowledge is definitely important, but also that understanding, that deep understanding and connection with adult learning and how it works, for me, is the key skill, definitely. So knowing that, I've actually felt that, I'm not going to say a trainer could teach anything, but you definitely can teach things that you're not as knowledgeable about as you would need to be as if you're like a traditional teacher or a professor. You can also talk through things with your group, right? You can say, this is a topic that interests me, and I have some thoughts about it, and I've read a couple of things about it, but I hope together we can create sort of a bigger pool of knowledge. So that knowledge element becomes less important, and that how people learn skill is much more relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And so then for facilitation, I think the key skill, and for me, it was really a journey of knowledge of, sorry, it was really a journey of letting go and having the courage to see what is actually in the room. And that was such a process of that traditional leadership, being in front of the room, being the smartest in the room, being able to explain everything to everybody, to like, I'm just the one asking the questions. And not even that, a lot of times I'm actually looking to the room to ask the smart questions, right? So that transition of your role from um, guiding people quite actively to just like touching lightly, that's been such a painful journey for for myself, because it requires a skill of letting go, of trusting the group, of looking for emergence, looking for patterns. Um, and it's also more, I would say, exhausting, because you constantly need to be alert. You don't really know what's popping up. So working with a lot of facilitators, I find that people tend to sort of start out or feel more comfortable with training, because there they have a certain control over what parts are going to be sort of presented and what questions are they going to ask. And then that pure facilitation where you're just holding space and you're looking what's emerging and you're constantly aware, that takes a, for at least for me, it's a big level up of, oh, okay, the group really knows everything and I'm just holding that space. So that is, for a lot of people, letting go of that control is definitely a skill that's required there.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to frame it. And I thought that the fact that it's quite nerve wracking
Mm-hmm.
I definitely resonate with. But I guess I find it initially much more nerve wracking, and then I find it much more relaxing. So,
Yeah.
like up until when you're in facilitation mode and you don't have to be the expert on everything, I find that until you've convinced a group that you trust them, until you've convinced the group to trust themselves, to know
Mm-hmm.
that they may have something valuable to offer, even if they're younger than some of the other people that they look up to in the room, that they might have something valuable to offer. That part is really, for me, really nerve wracking. And then when they've experienced a couple of rounds of, oh, okay, yes, maybe I can teach
Yeah.
somebody something from my own
Mm-hmm.
experience, then that's just a lovely place to get to.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
sometimes maybe in the preparation as well. Like I
mm,
find that when I'm preparing to facilitate something, I'm almost more nervous because I have so little to prepare, right? I'm just there like, all right, okay, I wish I had something to hold on to. So when you're preparing a training, you're like, oh, I'm working on my slides, I'm getting my, my exercises in order. It feels much more like, oh, I'm actually prepared. Yeah, definitely. I think there's that shift. Whereas when you're running a training, because you have these really clear learning objectives, and you're sometimes staring into a room and people are staring back at you like, yeah, no, that is sometimes much harder. Whereas in facilitation, the outcome isn't fixed, right? Like, so you play with it, you work with it. And yeah, I think that there's definitely something there in that shift as well of nerves versus control versus how things start flowing after a while, for sure.
yeah. So I will try and wrap this up, but I think there's one final point that I've heard a few people who have also kind of been talking about similar things make, which is that facilitators generally don't ask questions to which there is a fixed answer.
Mm. Mhm.
Whereas I think trainers probably would, right? Like, so maybe there's something in there about uh, complicated topics that you can train versus complex topics where there maybe isn't a definite answer. Just wondering if that brings up anything.
I think it's not that like polarized, let's put it like that. I think in training, what you do is that you ask questions that you have asked before and you have answered yourself before.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would definitely love to stimulate in trainings that we start asking questions more where we don't have a fixed answer.
Mm-hmm.
And working with professors and teachers and educators who want to facilitate more, that is actually one of the things that I'm also trying to push in their learning processes, that they start asking questions that don't have like correct or 5 points or half a point or whatever. And that it becomes more questions of reflection to let people, come to their own conclusions. I think the difference is that it's questions that you have already prepared, that you can prepare ahead of time, and they're questions that you yourself has asked and you have given answer to yourself. So it's something that is already in your repertoire, and then you are open to see what comes from the room and having respect for the answers that pop up. Whereas in facilitation, I find myself asking questions that sort of emerge because I don't know what's going to come from the room. So I don't know what will pop up, and then I feel like, oh, this is the right question here. But is everybody okay with that? So it's not so much that I don't know the answer, it's actually that I don't know the question a lot of time. And that question will pop up as we go. And that'll definitely be a question that I've never asked myself. And I've never answered myself. And so in that sense, yes, there is that distinction, but it's not as sort of simple as saying one is the answer, others you don't know the answer. It's really about that subtle difference of knowing the question and maybe not knowing the question yet beforehand. I think that might be a better way to describe it.
I love that.
Hmm.
That feels like a relatively good place to end this first round of this conversation, because I'm pretty sure that we can go for many, many more hours. Is there anything that you think we've missed that you would like to bring in at this point?
No, I think that a lot of times, and here I just wanted to come in because I get asked this question a lot, the difference between training and facilitating or learning facilitation or um we focus a lot on these differences. And I think some part of me also would like to focus on how they can empower each other more than on the differences as well. And also that people don't get too nervous about using the right terminology when they are working with this. Because at some point, if you can offer really exciting learning experiences with a focus on learning, and you're doing that in a really facilitative way, it's okay to call yourself a facilitator. I think it's so that's why sometimes we get into this sort of vegan versus vegetarian world where everything is about collaboration and what emerges from the room. We just have a slightly different view on certain things. So I just want to also say, like, it's also okay that there is that overlap and that there is that confusion, and that we don't need to police necessarily constantly, like, oh, you shouldn't call yourself a facilitator, or you should, like, I think that that is definitely a key message for me as well. We're all moving towards collaboration and emergence from the room with just slightly different objectives as well.
Yeah, 100%. None of us own any of these words.
Exactly.
And if anybody thinks that you can own words and police how people use them, good luck to you.
So true. Mm-hmm.
Fleur, thank you so much. We will make sure that both of our contact details are linked below if you think that we've missed anything or you want to add anything. I think this is a topic that I am sure we're going to talk about again and again and again as the field emerges and evolves around us, because I think, as you say, it is evolving. So thank you very much, Fleur, for a wonderful conversation. Every time I talk to you, I learn so much.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you so much for your insights as well. I'm bringing all this together. I think these conversations are fundamental. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For more videos like this, including videos such as Facilitation versus Consulting and Facilitation versus Moderation, visit bit.ly/Lucy Facilitates.
Sorry, I just have to say, I have a cat who's just destroying everything here. So I'm a little, sometimes when you see me looking, it's also because the cat is literally attacking everything.
I've seen the cat come onto screen a couple of times, but you can't see that in the cropped version.